He took my father's life right in front of me and then looked at me with those snake eyes ready to strike. It was at that moment I knew hell wasn't beneath the earth like Pastor Williams from town used to preach about in church. Hell was literally in my home. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment where you're watching from. Let's get started. My name is Angelina Mason, but everyone here in Pine Hollow, this place forgotten by God and man in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, knows me as Granny Angie the Quilter. I'm 81 years old, my fingers twisted from arthritis after making so many quilts that I sell at the county fair, and my memory sharper than a butcher's knife. Those who see me today, sitting in my rocking chair on the porch of my colorful little house, handing out candies to the neighborhood grandchildren, can't imagine the story of pain and resilience I've carried with me for nearly 70 years. I was born in 1944, in a poorly constructed wooden house in Creekside, a place so isolated that when it rained hard, we'd be stranded for days, with the creek overflowing and washing away everything in its path. It was a simple house, with a dirt floor, a wood stove always burning, and a crystal-clear spring that ran behind our property. We didn't have much, but my father, Andrew, always said, "As long as there's beans in the pot and a roof over our heads, we're already rich." My father worked as a logger. He'd leave before sunrise, with a machete on his belt and a straw hat on his head, and return after nightfall, carrying timber on his back that he sold to the middleman. It was hard and dangerous work, facing snakes, mountain lions, and sometimes the law, since he didn't always have a permit to cut timber from the forest. But he was honest in his own way, always bringing food to the table and never letting me or my brother Jude, who was 7 years older than me, go without the basics. "Look what I brought you, Angelina." He would sometimes arrive with a colorful ribbon for my hair or a piece of candy wrapped in bread paper. Small joys that made my eyes sparkle in that simple childhood. My mother, Abigail, worked as a seamstress. At first, she only served the neighbors, mending here, adjusting clothes there. But she became known for her careful work and soon started receiving orders even from people in town. That's when the opportunity came to work in a garment factory in Oak Ridge, a neighboring town almost 2 days' journey away on the dirt roads of that time. She hesitated at first, didn't want to leave us alone, but the pay was 3 times what she could make doing sewing at home. "It's just for a while," she would tell me, as she packed her bundle of clothes for the trip. "Soon, I'll save up some good money and come back to stay with you. And who knows, maybe I can even buy a new sewing machine." At first, she came back every week, spending almost the entire Sunday traveling just to spend a few hours with us. Then the visits became more spaced out. Every 2 weeks, then once a month. The roads were too bad, the journey exhausting, and there was always more work to do at the factory, more money to earn. With my mother's absence, the house felt different. My father, who was already naturally quiet, became more closed off, sadder. My brother Jude, who had been somewhat rebellious since he turned 15, became impossible to deal with. The fights between them, which were once rare, became routine. "I need money, Dad," Jude would ask almost every single day. "I want to get out of this backwater, go to New York City. Everyone's going to the big city, only we're rotting in this hole. And what will you do there, boy? Starve to death? Become a criminal? Here at least you have a roof and food," my father would respond, always with the same firmness. "Food? This slop we eat? Watery beans and cornbread every day? And this roof that leaks when it rains? How long are you going to accept living in this misery, old man?" My brother's words cut deeply into my father's heart. I could see the pain in his eyes of not being able to give his children a better life, the shame of being called a failure by his own flesh and blood. I, at 11 years old at the time, didn't fully understand all this anger from Jude. To me, our life was simple, but it wasn't bad. We had food, we had each other, and I could still attend the rural school 3 times a week when I wasn't helping at home. If you're still with me, I'd like to ask you to leave a comment saying where you're watching from. It warms my heart to know there are people from all across America listening to my story, even after so much time. And if you could leave a like, it helps this channel reach more people who might need to hear that it's possible to survive even the worst nightmares. The fights got worse over time. My brother started leaving home, staying away for days without sending word. He always came back smelling of moonshine, sometimes with money that we didn't know where it came from. New clothes, a watch, even a battery-powered radio he showed up with one day. My father was suspicious, asked questions, and there were more fights. "Where did you get this, Jude? Are you stealing?" "None of your business, old man. At least I'm making my way, not like you accepting this life of misery." Once I caught my brother going through my father's mattress, where he kept the money from selling timber. When he saw me at the door, he came at me with a fury I had never seen before. "If you open that little mouth of yours, I'll end you, understand? Don't even think about telling Dad." I was so scared that I didn't say anything. Days later, when my father went to get the money to buy supplies at Mr. Joseph's store, he discovered that half of what he had saved was gone. It was the biggest fight of all. "It was you, wasn't it? You took the money, you thief!" my father shouted, holding Jude by the shirt. "Let go of me, old man. Let go. I didn't take anything of yours." "Liar! Who else could it be? Angelina is a child, and only the three of us live in this house. It was the money to buy food for the month, you ungrateful son." I thought they were going to kill each other right there. My father, always so calm, seemed possessed by a rage I had never seen. My brother, cornered, denied everything, but his eyes told a different story. I stood paralyzed in a corner of the kitchen, not knowing what to do, until my father finally released Jude and stormed out, slamming the door, probably to avoid doing something worse. That night, when my father returned, he was calmer. He sat with me on the edge of the bed before I went to sleep, as he used to do when I was younger, and said something I'll never forget. "Angelina, my daughter, some people are born with a good heart, and some people are born with a heart full of darkness. No matter what we do, we can't change what's already in there. Your brother, he's had this darkness since he was little. I've tried everything, but I can't reach him. Promise me you'll always stay on the side of light, daughter? That you'll never let the world's evil harden your heart?" I promised, without really understanding what he meant. Only much later would I understand the weight of those words. How much my father already knew that something terrible was forming inside our home. The situation worsened when my mother sent a letter saying she would stay a few more months without coming home. The factory had increased production, they were paying overtime, and she wanted to save more money before returning. She sent some money with the letter and some new clothes she had made for me. My father was devastated but didn't show it. He just put the money under the mattress, along with the rest of his savings, and continued his routine. Jude, on the other hand, exploded when he found out. "See? Even she can't stand this miserable life anymore. She'd rather stay away from us than come back to this dump. Respect your mother, boy. She's working herself to death for you, to give you a better future." "Future? What future is there here, Dad? Tell me. Will I end up like you, carrying timber on my back until my body can't take it anymore, living in a shack that doesn't even have an indoor bathroom?" The fight was so bad that Jude disappeared for almost a week. When he returned, he was different. Calmer, almost friendly. He even helped my father with some chores around the house, fixed the leaking roof, things he never did before. My father was suspicious of this sudden change, but preferred to believe that perhaps his son was finally maturing. "See, Angelina? People can change," he told me one night, as we ate rice with beans and a squash he had planted in the yard. "Your brother is showing that he can be different." Little did he know that this calm was just the prelude to the biggest storm our family would face. Jude hadn't changed. He was just waiting for the right moment, like those mountain lions my father said would stay quiet in the brush, watching their prey, choosing the exact moment to pounce. And when the pounce came, it forever destroyed the girl I was. The girl who still believed the world could be a good place, that people could change, that tomorrow would be better than today. All of this died on a night of heavy rain, when the thunder drowned out my father's screams and his blood forever stained the dirt floor of our kitchen. But this part of the story, my dears, is what a human would never imagine could be possible. If you've stayed with me this far, hold on to my wrinkled hand as I take you through the darkest corners of my memory. Those that I tried to forget for so many years, but that remain here, etched into my soul like scars that not even time can erase. It had been 3 days since my mother had sent word that she would only return after another month. 3 days that my father had been walking with his head down, working even harder, leaving even before the rooster crowed, and returning when night had swallowed even the last ray of sun. 3 days that my brother Jude had been mysteriously calm, even helping around the house, something he never did. That night, the rain was falling so hard it seemed like it wanted to wash our little house away. The drops hit the tin roof, making a deafening noise. The lightning cut through the sky, illuminating the kitchen for seconds, and the thunder shook the walls as if they were made of paper. Nights like this were common in Pine Hollow, but this one had something different, a heaviness in the air that even I, at 11 years old, could feel. My father had come home earlier from work because of the storm. He was sitting at the kitchen table, illuminated by the weak light of the lantern, counting the dollar bills he had gotten from selling timber that week. It wasn't much, but along with what he had saved, it was enough to buy supplies for the month and even save a little. "Look here, Angelina." He showed me some coins, placing them in my small hand. "This is for you, to buy that new notebook you needed for school." I smiled, feeling the cold metal in the palm of my hand, thinking about the hardcover notebook I had seen at Mr. Joseph's store. It was so beautiful, with a flower design on the front. It would be the first new notebook I would have, not one of those reused ones that the teacher arranged for the poorer children. It was at that moment that Jude entered the kitchen. He had a strange look, kind of glazed over, and smelled of moonshine even though he was sober enough to walk without stumbling. "Counting money, Dad? How much do you have there?" he asked, pulling up a chair and sitting across from my father. "None of your business, Jude. Go to bed, it's late." "None of my business? Then whose is it? I'm your son, I have a right to know." My father sighed deeply, putting the bills in the pocket of his worn shirt. "There's enough for us not to go hungry this month, and to buy school supplies for your sister." Jude laughed, a dry laugh, without joy. "School supplies? What for? So she can end up like us? Stuck in this backwater? The only one who saved herself was Mom, who had the courage to leave." "Your mother didn't leave, boy. She's working, sending money to help us. It's different. It's no different. She doesn't come back because she can't stand this miserable life anymore, and I can't stand it anymore either." My father stood up from the chair, his eyes flashing with contained anger. "Then you leave too. You're grown up. You can very well try your luck somewhere else. Just don't think you're taking the money I sweated to earn." That's when I saw my brother pull something from his belt. At first, with the dim light of the lantern, I couldn't identify what it was. Only when the metal reflected the flash of lightning that tore through the sky did I see a knife. Not just any knife, but my father's hunting knife, the one he used to cut timber, with a carved wooden handle and a long, sharp blade. "Hand over the money, Dad," Jude said in a different voice, colder than I had ever heard. "Hand over everything you have there and what you have hidden under the mattress too." My father stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the knife, then on his son's face. There was no fear there, just a deep sadness, a disappointment that seemed to weigh tons. "So that's how it is? You're going to rob your own father? The man who gave you life, who raised you, who always put food in your mouth? Stop the drama. It's not robbery. It's just taking what's rightfully mine. You were never going to give it to me anyway." "I saved every penny thinking of the future of both of you," my father said, his voice choked up. "For you to have something better than I had. And this is how you thank me?" Jude advanced, the knife pointed at my father's chest. "Enough talk. Where's the money?" It all happened very quickly. My father tried to grab my brother's arm. They fought, knocked over the lantern, which went out when it fell, and we were in complete darkness, illuminated only by occasional lightning. I heard screams, sounds of struggle, things falling to the floor. I was paralyzed in a corner, mute with terror, unable to run or scream for help. When a stronger lightning illuminated the kitchen for a few seconds, I saw the scene that would change my life forever. My brother standing, the knife in his hand, dripping blood. My father on the floor, a dark stain spreading across his light shirt, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, his mouth half open as if he wanted to say something more. The thunder that came after the lightning swallowed my scream of horror. Jude turned in my direction, only then realizing that I had been there the whole time, witnessing everything. His eyes met mine, and what I saw there froze me to my soul. There was no remorse, No shock, just a calculating coldness, as if he had just killed a chicken for lunch, not taken the life of his own father. "See what you made me do, Angelina?" he said, his voice strangely calm. "It's your fault, too. If you hadn't always taken his side, if you hadn't always been tattling on me." I took a step back, touching the cold wall. I knew I needed to run, scream, seek help, but my body wouldn't obey. It was like being trapped in a nightmare, one of those where you try to scream but no sound comes out. "Now it's just the two of us," he continued, approaching slowly. "Until Mom comes back, you're going to have to obey me. And if you tell anyone what happened here, well, you've already seen what I'm capable of." I nodded, trembling so much that my teeth were chattering. It wasn't a promise, it was pure terror. Jude lit the fallen lantern, illuminating the kitchen again. My father's body lay on the floor, his eyes still open, looking at nothing. I wanted to run to him, hug him, tell him I loved him, but my brother's gaze kept me pinned in place. "Go to your room and don't come out until I say so," he ordered, already bending down to go through my father's pockets. "I have to clean up this mess." I ran to my little room, an area separated only by an old curtain. I threw myself on the straw mat that served as a bed and buried my face in the pillow to muffle the sobs. I cried until I had no more tears, until my body ached from trembling so much, until exhaustion finally dragged me into an uneasy sleep full of nightmares. When I woke up the next morning, for one glorious second, I forgot what had happened. It was just a nightmare, I thought, a horrible dream. But then I heard my brother moving in the kitchen, and it all came back like a giant wave, suffocating me. I got up slowly and pulled back the curtain. The kitchen was clean, with no sign of the horror of the previous night. The floor had been scrubbed, the furniture straightened. It was as if nothing had happened there, except that my father was nowhere to be found. "Good morning, little sis," Jude said with a disturbing normality. He was sitting at the table, counting money, my father's money. "Sleep well?" I didn't answer. My eyes scanned the kitchen, looking for some sign of my father, some proof of what I had seen. "If you're looking for Dad, you won't find him," he said, noticing my look. "I buried him in the back of the yard, under that old apple tree. Nobody will look there." I felt my stomach turn. He was talking about our father's death as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if he hadn't just killed the person who gave us life, who took care of us, who worked until his hands bled to give us the little we had. "Why?" was the only word I could say, my voice so weak I could barely hear myself. "Because he was in my way. Because he was never going to give me what I needed. Because he always preferred you, the obedient little daughter, Daddy's little darling." There was so much hatred in those words that I took a step back. How had I not noticed before how much my brother hated not just our life, but me and our father too? And now? What's going to happen? I asked, still unable to fully process the new reality I found myself in. Now? Now we're going to live our way until Mom comes back. You're going to keep going to school as if nothing happened. If anyone asks about Dad, say he went to work far away, in the lumber camp in Black Mountain. And when Mom comes back, well, we'll tell her the same thing. He got up from the chair and came toward me. Instinctively, I backed away until I felt the cold wall against my back. "And remember, Angelina," he said, gripping my chin firmly, forcing me to look into his eyes. "If you tell anyone, any person, what happened here last night, I'll do to you the same thing I did to him. Understand?" I nodded, tears silently streaming down my face. "Good. Now clean that face and go fetch water from the spring. Life goes on." Life went on, yes, but it was no longer life. It was survival in the crudest sense of the word. Every minute in that house became torture. Every corner held memories of my father. Every object reminded me of him. And every look from my brother reminded me that I was alone with a murderer. If you're still with me on this painful journey through my past, I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Sharing this story after so many years still hurts, but it also lifts an enormous weight. Each of your comments gives me strength to continue. And if you can leave your like, it helps this channel reach more people who might need to hear that, Even in the darkest moments, it's still possible to find a way back to the light. In the days that followed, I tried to maintain an appearance of normality. I went to school, came back, did the housework. When the neighbors asked about my father, I repeated the lie that Jude had created. He went to work at a lumber camp in Black Mountain. He'll be gone for a few months. Inside, I was dying a little each day. At night, lying on my mat, I cried silently, clutching my father's old shirt that I had hidden under my pillow. During the day, I avoided being near my brother as much as possible, but in a house as small as ours, it was almost impossible. Jude started drinking more, staying at home more. He used my father's money to buy moonshine, to bet on card games in town. Sometimes he'd come back bringing strange gifts for me. A hair ribbon, a small mirror, things I didn't even want to touch, knowing where the money to buy them came from. As the days passed, I noticed his look toward me was changing. It was no longer just the look of threat, of control. It was something different, something that made me feel dirty just being in the same room as him, something that made my stomach turn and my heart race with fear. A part of me knew what was coming, and that part was already thinking about how I could defend myself when the moment came. Because I knew, deep in my soul, that the worst was yet to come. It was on a Thursday, almost 2 weeks after my father's death, that my worst nightmare began to become reality. I had returned from school earlier because the teacher needed to go to town to resolve some problems. The day was hot, muggy, announcing a storm for later. When I arrived home, I found Jude sitting at the kitchen table, 3 empty bottles of moonshine beside him, his eyes red and a smile that chilled my soul. "You came home early today, little sister," he said, his voice slurred by drink. "Come here, sit close to your brother." "I need to wash clothes at the spring," I replied, trying to escape. "It's piling up." "The clothes can wait. Come here." There was something in his tone that left no room for discussion. Slowly I approached, keeping a safe distance, holding tightly to the strap of the cloth bag where I carried my notebooks. "You know, Angelina," he began, examining me in a way that made my whole body tremble with revulsion. "You're starting to look like Mom. The same eyes, the same way of walking." I took a step back, my heart beating so hard I thought it would explode. I knew that look. It was the same one I saw in older men when they looked at girls who already had the bodies of women, even though they were only 13, 14 years old. "You're my brother," I said, my voice weak with fear. "Stop it." He laughed, a laugh that had nothing of joy in it. "So what? In this house, the rules are mine now. Your father's not here anymore to protect you. Your mother's far away. Who's going to stop me?" At that moment, I did the only thing I could. I ran. I ran out of the house as if the devil himself was after me, into the woods, to anywhere that was away from him. I heard his shouts calling me, then the sound of him stumbling and falling, probably too dizzy from the drink to catch me. I stayed hidden in the woods for hours, trembling with fear, imagining what would happen when I needed to return. The rain that had been threatening finally came, strong, merciless, soaking me to the bone. Even so, I preferred to stay there, under the water, than to return to that house that was once my home and had now become my prison. I only returned when it was completely dark, hoping that Jude had drunk so much that he would be passed out. Luckily, that's what I found, him fallen on the bed, snoring loudly, stinking of moonshine and sour sweat. I locked myself in my little room, pushing a heavy chest against the curtain that separated us, knowing that it wouldn't really protect me, but giving me a false sense of security. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay looking at the thatched ceiling, thinking about how to escape, how to survive. I thought about my mother, who was supposed to return in a few weeks if the letter she sent was correct. Could I hold out until then? And even if I did, would she believe me when I told her what Jude had done to our father? Or would she take his side, as he had always been her favorite? The next morning, Jude woke up with a terrible hangover, vomiting in the yard, cursing the world. I took the opportunity to escape early, before he even noticed I was leaving, and went to school. There at least I felt safe, away from his clutches. It was at school, sitting in a corner of the yard eating lunch, that I began to formulate a plan. I couldn't continue living like that, waiting each day for the worst to happen. I needed to defend myself. I needed to do something. "Is everything all right, Angelina?" Mrs. Aurora, the teacher, asked me, noticing my silence, the dark circles under my eyes, the way I startled at any loud noise. Yes, teacher. I just miss my father, I replied, the lie coming easily after being repeated so many times. That's normal, dear. Working far away isn't easy for anyone. But he'll be back soon, won't he? I nodded, swallowing my tears. If she only knew the truth. If I could tell. But the fear was greater. The fear that no one would believe me. The fear of what Jude would do to me if he found out I had opened my mouth. I returned home as late as I could, taking the longest path, stopping to pick some wild berries, looking for any excuse not to arrive. When I finally had no more ways to delay, I entered slowly, expecting the worst. Jude was strangely calm. He had even made food, rice with beans that were half raw, but still food. Angelina, he said when he saw me enter, come eat. I made dinner for us. I was suspicious of this sudden kindness, but I was so hungry that I sat down and ate in silence, always keeping my eyes on the plate, avoiding meeting his gaze. Sorry about yesterday, he said after a while. I was drunk, talked nonsense. You're my little sister, I shouldn't have said those things. I wanted to believe it. For a brief second, I wanted to believe that the Jude from before, the brother who played with me when I was little, who carried me on his shoulders through the forest trails, was back. But I had seen enough to know that words meant nothing to him. Okay, I replied, still not looking at him. I'm going to bed. I'm tired. In the days that followed, Jude maintained this false kindness. He made food, asked how school had been, even fixed the roof that was leaking. But I noticed the small things. The way his eyes followed me around the house, how he always found an excuse to touch me when he passed by, how he would watch me sleep through the thin curtain that separated our rooms. Every night was a torment. Lying in the darkness, hearing his breathing from the other side, praying that he wouldn't decide that this would be the night when the thin barrier between us would be broken. Oh, my dears, how difficult it is to talk about these things even after so much time. My heart still tightens, my hands still tremble when I remember. But I need to tell. I need to get this poison out that has been stored inside me for decades. It was on a Saturday night that the inevitable happened. Jude had gone out during the day, returned late, smelling of moonshine as always. I was already in bed, pretending to be asleep, when I heard him pull back the curtain to my room. I know you're awake, Angelina, he whispered, his voice thick. Stop pretending. I remained motionless, my heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. I felt his weight making the mat sink when he sat beside me. You've been avoiding me, little sister. Why? It's just the two of us now. We have to take care of each other. His heavy hand touched my arm, and it was as if I had received an electric shock. My whole body reacted with revulsion. Leave me alone, Jude, I said, my voice trembling, moving away as far as I could. Don't be like that, he insisted, his hand now holding my arm firmly. I take care of you, give you food, shelter. Is this how you thank me? Please, I begged, tears already streaming down. I'm your sister. It's wrong. His hands moved up to my neck, squeezing lightly, a clear threat. Wrong was you being born and stealing all the attention from Dad and Mom. Wrong was you always being the favorite, the protected one. Now it's my turn to have what I want. That's when something snapped inside me. That paralyzing fear I felt gave way to an immense anger, a fury I had never experienced before. In the dark, my hand groped around and found the old scissors I used to cut fabric scraps. In a quick movement, I aimed for his arm and sank it in with all my strength. The scream that Jude let out must have awakened even the owls in the forest. He jumped back, holding his arm that was bleeding. You wretch, I'll kill you for this. I took advantage of the moment and ran out of the house, into the darkness of the night, into the middle of the woods, not caring about the thorns that tore my bare feet, the branches that whipped my face. I ran until I had no more breath, until my legs weakened and I fell to my knees on the damp earth. I spent the entire night hidden in a small cave I had known since childhood, trembling with cold and fear, imagining what I would do when dawn came. I couldn't go back home, that was certain. Jude would kill me after what I did. I couldn't go to the village. Everyone would ask questions I couldn't answer. I couldn't seek the police. In my child's mind, I thought I would be blamed for my father's death, since I had done nothing to prevent it. It was there, in that dark cave, hungry and cold, that I made the most difficult decision of my life. I would run away, leave everything behind, and try to reach my mother in Oak Ridge. I had no idea how I would do this, but anything was better than going back to that house. When the sun rose, I left my hiding place and went to the main road, determined to follow in the direction I thought was to Oak Ridge. I walked all day, my feet bleeding, my stomach growling with hunger, stopping only to drink water from the streams and eat some wild berries that I recognized as safe. At the end of the day, exhausted, I took shelter in an abandoned shed in the middle of the woods. I was so tired that I fell asleep immediately, lying on the hard floor, using my arm as a pillow. I woke up to the sound of footsteps. My heart almost stopped when I saw the silhouette in the door. It was a man. For a terrifying second, I thought Jude had found me. But when he spoke, I realized it was a different voice. "Girl, what are you doing here alone?" It was Mr. Theodore, an old trapper who sometimes passed by our house to sell furs to my father. He recognized me immediately. "Angelina? Andrew's daughter? What happened to you, child? You're all scratched up." I wanted to tell everything. About my father, about my brother, about the horror I had lived through in the last few weeks. But the words wouldn't come out. Fear still dominated me. "I got lost," was all I could say. "I was looking for the way to Oak Ridge, where my mother is working." Mr. Theodore looked at me suspiciously but didn't ask more questions. "You're going in the wrong direction, girl. Oak Ridge is the other way. Come, I'll take you to the road that goes there. There's a wagon that passes carrying merchandise. Maybe you can get a ride." I followed the old man in silence, grateful for the help, but still trembling with fear, constantly looking behind me, expecting to see Jude emerging from the woods at any moment. We reached the main road when the sun was already high. Mr. Theodore left me there with a piece of bread he took from his own lunch bag. "Stay here, girl. Soon someone will pass going to town. But are you sure you don't want to go back home? Your father must be worried." I swallowed hard, almost letting the truth escape. "No, I can't go back. I need to find my mother." He nodded, still suspicious, but left me there and went on his way. I sat by the side of the road for hours, watching the sparse traffic, gathering courage to ask for a ride from the first vehicle that passed. That's when I heard the sound of horse hooves approaching. I stood up hopefully, imagining it could be someone I knew who could help me. But when the rider got closer, my blood froze. Mounted on a bay horse, with an improvised bandage on his arm and eyes injected with hatred, was Jude. "Found you, little sister," he said, dismounting and coming toward me. "Did you really think you could run away from me? Those of you who are still listening to me, imagine the terror I felt at that moment. I was exhausted, hurt, without the strength to run again. Jude grabbed me by the arm violently, dragging me to the horse. "We're going home. We have unfinished business, you and I." That's when I realized this could be my last chance. If I went back home with him, I probably wouldn't live to tell the story. In that desperate moment, I made a decision that would change the course of my life forever. "We're going home. We have unfinished business, you and I." Jude's words still echoed in my head as he dragged me toward the horse. My legs were trembling. My heart seemed to want to jump out of my mouth. At that moment, something inside me awakened, a strength I didn't know I had, born of the purest desperation. While he was turning to mount the horse, while still holding my arm, my free hand found a large rock on the ground. Without thinking twice, I raised it and hit him with all my strength on the head. The sound was horrible, like a green coconut cracking. Jude staggered, released me, and fell to his knees, his hand on his head where blood was already beginning to flow. "You wretch," he mumbled, trying to get up, but falling again. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I mounted his horse with an agility I didn't know I had and galloped away, not looking back, not caring if I had killed my brother or just wounded him. At that moment, I was only thinking about escaping, about surviving. I rode for hours, following the main road, praying I was on the right path to Oak Ridge. The horse, a gentle animal accustomed to Jude, obeyed my basic commands. When night fell, I stopped in a small clearing away from the road. I was afraid to continue in the dark, to get lost. and I also needed to rest. I tied the horse to a tree, gave it water from a nearby stream, and huddled under a large tree, shivering with cold and fear. I couldn't sleep. Every sound from the forest startled me. Every shadow seemed to be Jude coming to find me. And more than the fear of him, I was tormented by the doubt. Had I killed my own brother? Was I now a murderer, just like him? When the first ray of sunlight pierced through the leaves of the trees, I got up, sore, and mounted again. I needed to continue. I needed to find my mother before Jude found me, if he was still alive. Around noon, I spotted the first houses of a village I didn't know. I stopped at a general store and asked the owner, a fat man with a thick mustache, if I was on the right path to Oak Ridge. "Yes, girl. Follow this road for about 12 more miles and you'll get there. But what's a child like you doing alone in these parts? And that horse there, whose is it?" "It's my father's," I lied, my heart racing. "He sent me to fetch my mother, who works at the garment factory in Oak Ridge. He's sick." The man looked at me suspiciously but nodded. "Want some water? You look like you haven't had a drink or eaten in days." I accepted the water and a piece of bread with sausage that he offered, devouring it in seconds. Only then did I realize how hungry I was. I thanked him and continued my journey, now certain I was on the right path. In the afternoon, when the sun was already beginning to set, I caught sight of the first brick houses of Oak Ridge. It was a small town, but to me, accustomed to Pine Hollow, it seemed enormous. Streets paved with cobblestones, some shops, a large church in the central square. I was amazed and, at the same time, terrified. How would I find my mother in this place? I stopped again at a general store and asked where the garment factory was. The owner, an old man with white hair, pointed the way. At the end of the main street, a large warehouse with a blue sign. "You can't miss it." I followed the directions, my heart in my throat. When I finally spotted the warehouse with the sign St. Rita's Garments, I dismounted from the horse and tied it to a nearby post. My legs could barely support me when I entered through the front door. A bell rang when I opened the door. A young woman came to attend to me, frowning when she saw my condition, dirty, hurt, with torn clothes. "Can I help you?" she asked, suspicious. "I'm looking for my mother, Abigail Mason. She works here." The woman's face lit up with a smile. "Oh, Ms. Abby, of course she's in the back. Want me to call her?" I nodded, unable to speak more. The emotion of being so close to my mother after all I had been through left me speechless. The woman disappeared through a door in the back, and a few seconds later, I heard the voice I most wanted to hear in the entire world. "Angelina? My daughter?" And there she was, my mother. Thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes, but still the most beautiful person I had ever seen. I ran into her arms and burst into tears, sobbing so hard it seemed I would break in two. "What happened, sweetie? Why are you like this, all hurt? Where are your father and your brother?" It was time. Time to tell everything, to pour out all that horror I had lived through in the last few weeks. But the words wouldn't come out. How could I tell my mother that her eldest son had killed her husband, that he had tried to abuse his own sister, that I might have killed my brother with a blow to the head? "Calm down, sweetheart," she said, hugging me tighter. "Let's go to the house where I'm staying. There you can tell me everything." The house was a small room in the back of the factory, with a single bed, a small stove, and a tiny bathroom. Even so, it seemed like a palace compared to the horror I had left behind. Mom heated water, bathed me as she used to do when I was little, took care of my wounds, gave me hot food. Only afterward, sitting on the edge of the bed, did she hold my hands and ask, "Now tell me, honey, everything." And I told her. With a voice broken by sobs, I told about the increasingly worse fights between my father and Jude. I told about the night of the storm, about the knife, about my father's blood staining the kitchen floor. I told about the days of terror alone with my brother, about his threats, about the night he tried to touch me. I told about my escape, about the rock, about my desperate journey to find her. When I finished, my mother was as pale as a ghost, her hands trembling, tears silently streaming down her face, marked by hard work. "My God," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "My God, what have I done? What have I done leaving you alone with him?" She had always known that Jude was troubled, violent at times, but she never imagined he could go so far. The guilt I saw in her eyes was almost unbearable. "It's not your fault, Mom," I said, holding her hands. "You didn't know. Nobody knew." That night, I slept, hugging my mother in the narrow bed, physically and emotionally exhausted, but for the first time in weeks, feeling safe. The nightmare was over, or at least, that's what I thought. The next morning, loud knocks on the door woke us up. Mom opened it and came face to face with two men. One was the town sheriff, the other a deputy. Behind them, pale and with his head bandaged, was Jude. "Mrs. Mason," the sheriff said, removing his hat. "Your son here has made a serious accusation. He says your daughter stole his horse and tried to kill him with a rock." My world collapsed again. Jude had found me, and worse, he had arrived before me, crafting his version of the story. "Sheriff," my mother spoke with a firmness I didn't imagine she had. "My daughter arrived here yesterday, and she told me a very different story. She said her brother killed her father, my husband, and then tried to abuse her." The sheriff looked from Jude to me, his brow furrowed. "Those are very serious accusations, ma'am. Do you have any proof?" "I have my daughter's testimony. And if you go to our house in Pine Hollow, you'll find my husband's body buried under the apple tree in the backyard." Jude's face contorted with hatred. "She's lying. That brat is making up stories." "I would never do that." The sheriff raised his hand, asking for silence. "We're all going to the station. This needs to be properly investigated." The hours that followed were the longest of my life. Sitting in a small, stuffy room at the station, I told my story once more, every detail, every horror. The sheriff listened, taking notes, his face impassive. "I'll send men to Pine Hollow," he said when I finished. "If they find the body as you said, your brother will answer for murder. Meanwhile, you two stay here in town." I spent 3 days in agony, waiting for news. Jude was locked in a cell at the station, and I was terrified that he might escape, that he would come after me again. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every noise in the street made me jump. On the 4th day, the sheriff appeared at the small room where we were staying. His face was grave. "We found the body, exactly where the girl said. It was buried under the apple tree." My mother collapsed in a chair, her hands on her face, sobbing. I stood paralyzed, a mixture of relief and horror. On one hand, they had believed me, Jude would pay for what he did. On the other, the confirmation of my father's death made everything too real, too painful. "What happens now?" my mother asked between sobs. "Your son will be transferred to the county jail in Jefferson, where he'll await trial. He's a minor. He's 16 years old, but for the crime he committed, he'll be tried as an adult. The penalty for first-degree murder can be up to 30 years. 30 years. That number echoed in my head. Jude would be locked up until he was an old man. I should feel avenged, relieved, but what I felt was just an enormous emptiness, a sadness that seemed to have no end. We had lost everything. My father was dead, my brother was going to spend his life in jail, our house in Pine Hollow was now stained with memories too horrible for us to return. In the months that followed, Mom and I tried to rebuild our lives. She continued working at the factory, and I started helping too, learning to sew. We slept together in the small back room, saving every penny to one day rent a little house of our own. Jude's trial happened almost a year later. It was the first time I had seen him since that day at the station. He was thinner, paler, but the hateful look remained the same. When he saw me entering the courtroom, his eyes narrowed, and he muttered something I couldn't hear, but I could read on his lips. "I'll get you one day." Those words chilled my soul. Even with him handcuffed, surrounded by officers, even knowing he would be convicted, the fear I felt was almost paralyzing. That's when I understood that I would never be truly safe as long as he was alive. And it was at that moment, sitting on the hard bench of that courtroom, that I began to plan my true revenge. It wasn't enough that he be imprisoned. It wasn't enough that he pay for his crimes in jail. I wanted him to suffer as he had made me suffer. I wanted him to feel the same fear, the same helplessness, the same despair. On the night after the trial, where Jude was sentenced to 25 years in prison, I returned to our little room and began to devise my plan. It was a long plan, one that would require patience, determination, and a kind of coldness that I didn't even know I possessed. First, I needed to become financially independent. I began working more hours at the factory, learning all the secrets of sewing. Then I started doing extra work at night, sewing made-to-measure clothes for the wealthy ladies of the town. My natural talent with needle and thread soon made me well known, and in a few years, at 18, I had saved enough money to rent a small house for me and my mother. At 20, I opened my own sewing shop, a tiny space in the center of town. By 22, I had 3 employees working for me. At 25, I bought my first house, a 2-story building with a porch, something I never imagined I would own. All this time, I didn't stop keeping track of Jude's whereabouts. Every 6 months, I would go to Jefferson and check if he was still in jail. I discovered he was a problematic inmate, always getting involved in fights, always in solitary confinement. When I turned 27, I learned that Jude had been transferred to a maximum security prison in Atlanta after trying to kill another inmate. That news should have made me happy. He was even further away, even more contained. But it only increased my determination. My plan was just beginning. If you're still with me on this dark journey, know that the worst, or best, depending on your point of view, was yet to come. The true revenge, the one I meticulously planned for years, would only come when Jude thought he was finally free, when he thought he had escaped his past, when he believed he could go back to terrorizing me. Time passed, marking its relentless rhythm in my wrinkles, in my hair that was beginning to show the first gray strands. Mom fell ill, a disease in her lungs that doctors said was from the fabric dust she had breathed for years at the factory. I cared for her until the end, watching that strong woman slowly waste away until one night, she simply didn't wake up anymore. Her death left me empty for months. It was as if the last link to my previous life had been broken. Only Jude remained, and my plan for revenge, which had become the reason for my existence. It was when I turned 35 that I received the news I both feared and, at the same time, awaited with a sick anxiety. Jude had been granted parole for good behavior after serving just over 20 years of his sentence. My heart raced as I read the official letter. After so many years, he would be free, free to return, free to fulfill the silent promise he had made in the courtroom so many years ago. But I was no longer that frightened 11-year-old girl. I was a successful, respected woman with resources and contacts. And more importantly, I was ready for him. The news of Jude's parole fell like a stone in my stomach. 20 years had passed since that terrible night. But the fear I felt when reading that official letter was as real as the day I first ran away. Only now, everything was different. I was different. Oak Ridge had become my home. From a modest seamstress, I had transformed into the owner of the largest garment business in town, Angelina's Atelier. I had a beautiful house on the main street, respect from the community, and something Jude would never expect: influence. The years of hard work had earned me not only money, but connections with powerful people in the region. The mayor, the sheriff, judges, they all knew and respected me. For 2 decades, besides building my business, I strategically cultivated these friendships. I always knew that one day Jude might get out of prison, and I wanted to be prepared. Every dinner I hosted for authorities, every donation I made to the mayor's campaign, every fancy dress I sewed for free for the sheriff's wife. It was all part of my plan. The letter said that Jude would be released the following week, on a Wednesday. It also informed that, as a condition of his parole, he would need to regularly report to a parole officer and could not leave the state of Georgia. What the letter didn't say, but I knew through my sources, was where he would go after being released. I got this information through the son of the former sheriff of Oak Ridge, who now worked in the state penitentiary system. According to him, Jude had given as his address for parole a cheap boarding house on the outskirts of Jefferson. Apparently, he had made some contacts during his years in prison, people who promised to help him when he got out. I imagined 1,000 different scenarios. Jude could simply start a new life far away, forget the past, never look for me again. But I knew my brother. Hatred was the only thing that sustained him, the only emotion he truly understood. He would come after me sooner or later. The night before his release, I couldn't sleep. I paced around the house, checking the locks on doors and windows, even knowing he wouldn't appear so quickly. I had installed the most modern alarm system, but still, fear was stronger than reason. A week passed without news. Then 2. I almost began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had decided to leave me in peace. That's when I received the first sign, a letter with no return address. Inside, just a sheet of paper with 5 words written in crooked letters. I haven't forgotten my promise. My blood froze. He knew where I lived. He had found me, even after so many years, even though I had changed so much. I took the letter to the sheriff, a man named Claude who had become my friend over the years. "Angelina, this is serious," he said after reading the threat. "I'll arrange for a patrol car to regularly pass by your house, and we'll check his parole conditions. If he's outside the permitted area, we can send him back to prison." I thanked him, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. Jude was too clever to be caught so easily. He had probably sent the letter through someone else, keeping himself within the geographical limits imposed on him. I began living in a constant state of alert. I hired a private security guard to stay at the door of my shop during the day. At night, I slept with a revolver under my pillow, a gift from the sheriff, who taught me how to shoot as a precaution. 2 weeks after the letter, I saw a man standing across the street, watching my shop. It was late afternoon. The sun was already setting. Even with the distance, even after 20 years, I recognized him immediately. It was Jude. Older, thinner, with hair almost completely white, but still with those same eyes that had haunted my nightmares for decades. He didn't do anything, just stood there, watching me. When he noticed I had seen him, he smiled. A cold, calculating smile that reminded me of the night he killed our father. Then, he simply turned around and left, disappearing around the corner. That night was the worst since I received the news of his parole. He hadn't done anything beyond showing himself, but the message was clear. I'm here. I'm watching you. And when you least expect it, that's when I decided to put my plan into action. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't live in this constant terror. If he wanted to terrorize me, show his power over me, I would show him that I was no longer that defenseless girl from before. Using my contacts, I discovered where he was staying. A cheap boarding house on the outskirts of town, not in Jefferson, as he had told the authorities. He was already violating his parole just by being there, but I didn't just want to report him and send him back to prison. I wanted more. I wanted him to feel the same fear that I had felt during all those years. My revenge began subtly. First, I had him evicted from the boarding house. A conversation with the owner, a reminder about the new tenant's criminal record, a casual mention about the health inspections the city had been conducting in establishments of that type. The next day, Jude was on the street with his few possessions in an old backpack. Next, I made it difficult for him to find work in town. A word here, a comment there, and soon all the establishments knew he had been convicted of murder and attempted abuse. Nobody wanted to hire someone like that, especially in a small town like Oak Ridge. Without a roof, without work, Jude began to get desperate. I watched him from a distance, seeing him waste away, sleeping on park benches, asking for food at restaurant doors. It seemed fair. He had taken everything from me. Now I was taking everything from him. But it wasn't enough. I wanted him to know it was me behind it all. I wanted to see the fear in his eyes when he realized the roles were reversed, that now I had the power. One night, when I saw him sleeping on a bench in the central square, I approached. 20 years older, well-dressed, hair done up, I no longer looked like that frightened girl. Still, he recognized me immediately when he opened his eyes. "Little sister," he said, his voice hoarse, "finally came to visit me." "I came to see what's left of you," I replied, keeping a safe distance. "Enjoying your new life?" He laughed, a dry laugh, without humor. "It's temporary. Soon I'll find a way to establish myself. And then what? You'll try to scare me again? You'll try to hurt me like you tried that night?" "Who knows?" he replied, with that cold smile I knew so well. "Life takes many turns, doesn't it?" That's when I realized my plan wasn't working as I expected. Even reduced to that miserable condition, Jude showed no fear. On the contrary, He still seemed to believe he had some power over me, that he could threaten me. I needed to go further, much further. In the days that followed, I intensified my revenge. I had him expelled even from the places where homeless people usually sought shelter. I made sure no one offered him food or help. Gradually, he was pushed to the margins of the town, to the most isolated and dangerous places. A week after our meeting in the square, I received a call from Sheriff Claude. "Angelina, I need you to come to the station. It's about your brother." My heart raced. Had Jude done something? Attacked someone? Or worse, had he discovered my involvement in his misfortune and reported me? When I arrived at the station, the sheriff was serious, his face grave. "We found your brother this morning, by the river. He didn't survive." The words took time to make sense in my head. "Jude dead? How? Why? What happened?" I asked, my voice firmer than I expected. "From what we could determine, he got involved with dangerous people, the kind you don't want to owe money to. He was found with signs of severe beating. The coroner says he probably died from internal bleeding." A wave of contradictory emotions flooded me. Relief, knowing I would never have to fear him again. Guilt, for having indirectly contributed to that end. But above all, a sense of justice finally being done. The cycle was complete. "We need you to do the formal identification and arrange the burial," the sheriff continued. "I know you didn't have a good relationship, considering what he did to your father, but—" "I'll do what's necessary," I replied, interrupting him. He was my brother, despite everything. That same day, I saw Jude's body for the last time. Lying on the cold table at the morgue, he seemed smaller, more fragile than he had ever seemed in life. The signs of violence were evident. The swollen and purple face, deep cuts, broken bones. Part of me wanted to feel pity, feel sadness, but all I could feel was a strange peace. I arranged a simple burial, without a religious ceremony. Only the gravedigger and I were present when the cheap coffin descended into the earth. I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I just stood there, watching, feeling the weight of the years slowly dissolving, as if an invisible chain that bound me to the past had finally broken. When I returned home that night, I sat on the porch and looked at the stars, thinking about everything that had happened, about how that frightened 11-year-old girl had transformed into the woman I was today, about how fear had been my companion for so long that I almost didn't recognize the sensation of finally being free from it. "Dad," I whispered to the starry sky, "it's over. It's finally over." In the months that followed, I surprised myself with how I felt. There wasn't the euphoria I imagined I would feel when Jude finally left my life. Instead, there was a quietness, an acceptance, as if a very long and painful chapter had finally come to an end, allowing a new one to begin. I went back to focusing on my business, which I had somewhat neglected during those turbulent weeks. I began participating more in the life of the community, opening up more to people. I even started thinking about something I had never considered before, a family of my own. At 35 years old, many would say it was already late, but for me, it was as if life was just beginning. It was at a church social that I met Sebastian, a widower a few years older than me with 2 grown children. He was a gentle, calm man, completely different from the men I had known throughout my life. Something about him, perhaps the way his eyes seemed to smile even when he was serious, or how he listened attentively when I spoke, captivated me immediately. Our courtship was slow, respectful. He never pressured, never demanded more than I was ready to give. When he asked me to marry him, 6 months later, I felt a mixture of happiness and fear. Would I be ready to share my life with someone after everything I had been through? Would I be capable of trusting another person that much? But Sebastian was patient. "You don't need to answer now," he said. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here waiting." A month later, I accepted. The wedding was simple, just close friends and his family. I began a new phase of my life, slowly learning to be a wife, to be a stepmother, to be part of a family again. I never had biological children. The doctors said that the physical and emotional traumas of my childhood had left irreversible consequences in that regard. But Sebastian's children accepted me as part of the family, and with time came the grandchildren who filled our home with joy. The years went by, the wrinkles appeared, The gray hairs multiplied. Sebastian left before me, almost 10 years ago, from a heart attack in his sleep. It was a painful loss, but different from the excruciating pain I felt when I lost my father. It was a mature pain, a longing that coexisted with gratitude for the years we had together. And now, at 81 years old, sitting in this rocking chair, watching life pass by my window, I think about everything I've lived through. The terror of those days in Pine Hollow, the long journey of reconstruction, the revenge that, in the end, wasn't exactly as I planned, but that brought the closure I so needed. I learned that life rarely follows the paths we plan, that pain can break us or strengthen us depending on what we choose to do with it, that even in the most desperate situations, there is always a way out. There is always a tomorrow. My dears who have accompanied me this far on this painful journey through my past, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to an old lady unburden memories she has carried for so many decades. If this story touched your heart in some way, please leave your like so that others may also know it. If you can, subscribe to the channel to follow other stories of women who, like me, found strength where there seemed to be none. Life isn't always fair, my dears, but it always gives us the chance to rewrite our own story, to find beauty even after the deepest darkness. With love, this old lady who learned that true revenge isn't in causing pain to those who hurt us, but in rebuilding our life so beautiful and full that the past loses its power over us. I'm Granny Angie the Quilter, and I thank you for listening to me. May God bless each one of you, and may there never be a lack of love and protection for our children, who are the world's greatest future.